Is this the golden moment to buy in Auckland or Wellington? CoreLogic's Kelvin Davidson returns to tell you the numbers and the trends in the main cities. Keep watching if you want to gain financial freedom faster.
Financial freedom faster. Financial freedom faster.
If you like making money rather than watching everyone else do it, hit that subscribe button and get ahead, because this is New Zealand's fastest growing real estate and investment show. Kelvin Davidson is CoreLogic's Chief Economist and the brains behind the latest affordability report. Kelvin, break it down for us. Which major city is seeing the most improvement in affordability?
It's definitely Wellington. Wellington and Auckland. So those, no surprises, those are the markets, at least amongst the main centres where house prices have fallen the most. So, of course, you'd anticipate seeing a reasonable improvement in housing affordability in those markets too. But yeah, certainly the one that stands out is Wellington. There was a long-held perception that Christchurch was the most affordable main centre, and it was. That was true on our measures. But just in the past 6 to 12 months, that's not true anymore. That crown has gone to Wellington, and so certainly stands out as the most affordable main centre. We've seen all of our measures improve, and in Wellington in particular, those measures not only have they improved, but they've gone back to about their average. So keep in mind, as I've been saying throughout this, that yes, there's been an improvement in housing affordability generally, but the measures still are a little bit worse than average. In Wellington, they're not. They're actually back to average or even slightly below. I think the mortgage payments figure for Wellington is 40% versus an average of 41%. So it's actually got slightly better than normal. So big shifts in Wellington. Now, also, I suppose housing affordability doesn't necessarily tell you everything about the future either. Just because some of those measures have returned to normal in Wellington or even slightly below, it doesn't necessarily mean we're suddenly going to see a big boom in Wellington either, because you have to look at other forces. You look at things like public sector cutbacks, weak confidence levels around that wider Wellington economy. So housing affordability is a big part of the story, but it's not the only part of the story. And so when you're thinking about the housing market outlook, yes, the starting position for affordability matters, but there's going to be other forces too. And so I'm not necessarily anticipating a big boom in Wellington, but it probably tells you something about the direction of travel over the medium term. At some point, when those things do shift around, there could be value in that Wellington market, because it has fallen a long way. Maybe not yet, but there will be at some point.
Yeah, so for the Auckland data, what jumped out at you the most?
Well, I suppose just really the improvement like we've seen elsewhere as well. Auckland's obviously our biggest market. It's got some of the most expensive housing. I think Queenstown's still got the highest median value, but Auckland's not far behind. So, big dominant economy, big dominant property market. It's something like 35 and 40% of all jobs, all houses, all economic output. Anything you look at, population, 35 and 40% of that of the national total is in Auckland. So whatever goes on there is going to play a big role nationally. And yeah, we've seen housing affordability improve a lot. Some of the measures are back to, I think, 8 or 9 year lows, or in other words, housing affordability has improved to that kind of position. Certainly the whole post-COVID boom has been unwound, and we're back to a reasonable position of affordability. The mortgage payments number has improved a lot. So if you take a step back, you can say, okay, again, it's this relative thing, I suppose. You can say, yes, housing in Auckland is a lot cheaper than it used to be, and some people might be starting to see value, but also it's probably not cheap necessarily in absolute terms. So there's always going to be that lens to put over these results. But yeah, in a general environment where housing affordability has improved, there's probably going to be opportunities emerging. First home buyers, we're still seeing them pretty active in the Auckland market, so they're eyeing up opportunities. I guess the flip side of improving housing affordability on some of these measures is also improving rental yields. As house prices come down, rental yields will tend to go up. So we've seen that happen in Auckland as well. So potentially some investors will be starting to see value again. And these are averages again. So keep in mind that you don't buy the average property, you're buying an individual property on an individual street. And yep, the rental yields on average across Auckland, they've got better. They might still look fairly low compared to other parts of the market, but you're not buying the average. You drive a property hard, you can get a much better yield than that. So I suppose it's adding to this, the whole theme of this report, I guess, is adding to that sense that thing that there's still challenges for people, but it has got a lot better. And I think that's feeding into that story around the housing market at the moment, that things are just turning. There's a bit more optimism coming back, and we're seeing prices rise a little bit. And I think the fact that affordability is back to some kind of normality will be part of that story.
Just a reminder, your competition has already subscribed to the fastest growing property and investment channel in New Zealand. That means they're getting the insights first, making the moves first, and locking in profits while you're still debating whether to click a button. Be smart and subscribe. Does the data for New Zealand show a lot of internal migration? Say, for example, people moving from Auckland to Christchurch, and most international movers want to come to the bigger cities, Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch seems to be booming. Have you got any insights there?
Yeah, internal migration is the data is a little bit patchy, and you don't get regular updates on it, and it's a little bit hard to measure. Certainly, the feeling around internal migration flows is that there has been certainly just after COVID, there's obviously people leaving Auckland and moving to other parts of the country to escape lockdowns and get a bit more space, the lifestyle block or whatever. I think to some extent that's probably gone into reverse a little bit, and it might not ever have truly been significant anyway. But I think there is a sense that people are, say, moving to Christchurch, at least internally. There's certainly a good vibe around that, even though affordability isn't as good as it say is in Wellington right now. I think people do still see Christchurch as a good place to live and reasonably affordable housing with a quality element too. Even though a house price to income ratio in Wellington now looks better than Christchurch, what are you getting for that money, I suppose, is the other factor. And a lot more new houses around Greater Christchurch, you arguably getting a better quality property on average. So that's something to take into account as well. A little bit of a sense that internal migration is moving towards that Christchurch area. International migration, I should say, does tend to go into the main centres. So yes, net migration at the moment is tailing off, but Auckland does tend to benefit disproportionately from that. Certainly the big migration boom we've had sort of through 2023, that sort of period. A lot of that migration would have gone into Auckland, other main centres as well, Wellington, Christchurch. So, it depends on which type of migration you're looking at, and it can be a bit hard to measure. The data can be a bit out of date, but there is a sense that the main centres are still growing, put it that way, in terms of demand for property.
In these regional centres, the secondary ring cities, any interesting tidbits of information that you took away from this report?
I suppose just the general sense that affordability has improved pretty much everywhere. Yeah, we have seen, to differing degrees, but pretty much everywhere we have seen house prices fall. In some areas it's been bigger, some areas smaller, but generally across all of the provincial or regional markets, house prices have fallen in the past 2 or 3 years. Obviously interest rates, that's the same wherever you are. Those interest rates have come down, and we've generally seen some income growth as well. And to some extent, the income growth may even have been a little bit stronger in the provincial areas, reflecting kind of their underlying farming economies. Dairy farming is going pretty well at the moment. So, those provincial incomes have perhaps ticked up a little bit faster. So, generally housing affordability has improved pretty much everywhere for buyers. There is still that renting situation, and that is something that comes through pretty clearly whether you look at the main centres or the provincial markets. Renting is pretty much as tricky as it's been almost everywhere. So there is still this, whether you look at the main centres, whether you look at the provincial markets, there is still this, I guess, a little bit of a divergence at the moment between, not saying buying a property is easy, but those affordability measures for buyers/owners have improved, whereas the affordability measures for renters are still pretty tough, and that applies whether you're in the provincial markets or the main centres. So that's probably the main thing. It's not necessarily any particular provincial market I'd pick out. Queenstown always stands out for being relatively unaffordable, but you sort of no surprises there, so that nothing too much has changed there. Even though there has been an improvement, it's still pretty expensive, obviously. So Queenstown's always kind of there or thereabouts, but generally that main theme of housing affordability improving for buyers, still a little bit stretched for renters, is applying wherever you look.
Yeah, Wellington certainly would be a bit more affordable now that prices have dropped so much. I was taking note of the difference in incomes, the average incomes for certain areas. Figures from memory around 136,000, 138,000 average incomes for Auckland and Wellington. And then I saw that Hamilton and Tauranga quite far below that, under 100,000 average income. Does the affordability measure take into account the regional income differences, or?
Yeah. So we get those figures from Infometrics. They're a prominent economic consultancy. They model. Now, these are household incomes too, so this is taken into account all earners within the household. We're not sort of making some vague assumptions about, each household has 1.5 earners or something like that, and we multiply an individual income up to get the household income. These are actually model household incomes, so all of that is factored in. So very, very good data, and it's available on a timely basis quarterly. So we can do these numbers quarterly, whereas some other housing affordability reports can't be as timely as that. So we have very good data on that. And yes, we'll calculate a house price to income ratio or a mortgage payments figure for each TA. So yes, we take into account Hamilton house prices and Hamilton incomes, Auckland house prices, Auckland incomes. And so there can be differences that emerge simply because an area has a very high income or a very low income, and that can be part of it. But generally, you'll see an area that has a very high income, like Auckland or Wellington, also has pretty high house prices. So it just leaves the ratio of house prices to incomes similar to other areas. So all of those relativities are taken into account. But yeah, the fact is that Auckland and Wellington have seen those big falls in house prices. They have relatively high incomes, and that means their ratios have improved a lot. And that is something, I guess, about the Wellington figure, is that Wellington, I think, amongst all of the TAs or the districts or cities across the country, Wellington does have the highest median household income, and that's reflecting that prevalence of public sector jobs and that Wellington measure. Yes, it can have benefits during an upswing in the public sector because high incomes get some growth there. It's just going to make their housing affordability picture look even better, or feed through to higher growth in house prices. But it can also have the flip side effect where you have such big reliance on one sector of the economy. When there's cutbacks there, it can work the other way too. So yeah, all of that's taken into account, and we think we've got the best data on house prices and the best data on incomes. So hopefully it's the best report as well.
Yeah, I guess Queenstown has the same issue of most other places. There's infrastructure limitations. There's labor. There's not enough construction workers to go around, and the demand can only go so far. Thanks, Kelvin. If you want to have a look at that housing affordability report, you can jump on CoreLogic and take a look for yourself. Just a reminder, money moves fast, and the investors making the most of it are here. This is the fastest growing property channel in New Zealand for a reason. If you don't subscribe now, you know that somebody else is already using this knowledge to make their next deal while you hesitate.
Less debt, more cash, passive income coming fast. Make your money work for you. Live the dream, it's overdue. So don't just wait, take control. Mortgage HQ will make you bold. Financial freedom's in your hands.